What is something that most people hate doing, but as an executive in a construction company, you need to get comfortable with doing? It is public speaking. Whether it's to a small group, the team that you lead, or to a larger group. I was working with one of my clients yesterday. We were having a dinner after an all-day strategy session, and he stood up in front of the executive team and addressed them at the dinner table in a very meaningful way. Whatever the case is, you need to get more effective at public speaking. And that is why I'm delighted to welcome Robbie Crabtree to the podcast. Robbie Crabtree is an expert in terms of helping creators, founders, and executives speak with vision and power. And the great thing about Robbie is he's not some sort of, Tony Robbins dude bounding around the stage. He's just going to give you practical, straightforward advice on exactly how you can become a better public speaker, even if you're deeply uncomfortable doing it. This interview will be absolutely helpful to you. I know you're going to enjoy it. Feel free to connect with Robbie. All his information is in the show notes. He could be a great resource to you as far as helping you to build your public speaking chops. And you will find this interview extremely practical and useful. Share it with other people. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Robbie, thank you for joining me here today.
Hey, thanks, Eric. I'm really excited to be here.
It's interesting. Many people have challenges with public speaking. I know you're an expert in helping executives to be more comfortable in that space. In your experience working with them, why is it that people struggle with public speaking?
I think there's really three main ways that we think about this. There's first, people who feel the sense of imposter syndrome. That's a big one I come in contact with, where they just don't feel like they have the right thing to say or deserve to be speaking to these people. Like, what if they judge me? So I think that's the big one. The second one is they have energy and they associate that with nerves. And I love this example is a basketball player in the last second, if their team is down by a point and they have 5 seconds left, there's going to be 3 players on that court who don't want anything to do with the ball.
Right.
But there's going to be 2 players who want the ball. And the difference is the 3 who don't want it look at it as a chance to fail. They see all of the risk. They feel nervous. Whereas the 2 who are like, I want the ball, I see the reward, I can be the hero, they see it as excitement and an opportunity to succeed, right? And I love this idea of it's the exact same situation. It's just how your mindset applies to that energy you're feeling. And so most people struggle because they think they're nervous. They tell themselves they're nervous, which guess what? That makes them nervous. So we need to deal with that. So that's the second big one. The third big one is they don't know how to connect to an audience. Most people fear public speaking because they think the audience is going to look at them and not get what they're trying to say. And so they're afraid of that failure, right? They're afraid of not connecting with them. And all of a sudden that hurts their ego. That hurts their sense of self-worth or self-esteem, or you're going to judge me. And this is really where it comes down to. So we have kind of those 3 that it tends to fall into.
Okay, so let's look at each one of those. They're interesting. When it comes to imposter syndrome, I think of it in 2 ways. Number one, perhaps I'm insecure in my grasp of the topic I'm speaking on, or perhaps I'm insecure in terms of how I'll be perceived by others. Which one do you think of those weighs in the most to imposter syndrome as you look at it?
I think it's normally the first one is the most common, where it's, I feel like I don't belong in that room. I don't belong talking to that person. And even if they're an executive, this is the crazy thing, Eric.
Right.
Even if they're an executive, oftentimes they'll feel like, yeah, I can be an executive leading my team, but I can't go and talk to other people. I don't belong in this same room. Here's what I have to say about that. Imposter syndrome is actually a sign. It's a signal to us to lean into it. It means we have an opportunity to do something that's going to make us grow. We all know if you go to the gym, you don't get stronger and get better looking muscles unless you actually push yourself to where it's uncomfortable. You have to increase that resistance. So to me, I try to help people understand this idea. Everybody kind of feels imposter syndrome at some point if they're doing the right things, because they should. That means you're moving into bigger and better situations. You're putting yourself out there to force yourself to grow. And at the end of the day, isn't that what every executive, every leader wants to do, is to grow as a person and as an individual? So I think imposter syndrome, lean into it. It's a great sign.
I think it's this interesting, this idea of energy versus nerves. And you use that analogy of the basketball team with the 3 people who don't want the ball, the 2 people who do. Let's say in the context of public speaking, I am one of those 3 people who don't want to get up there and make the speech. And yet perhaps I'm in a new executive role, or the company annual meeting is coming up and I have to make that speech. How do I move myself from the group of 3 that doesn't want to shoot to the people who want the ball?
So first off, you start by just realizing that it is just energy. And as soon as you start realizing that, you mentally shift that mindset. Instead of the problem is so many people immediately call it nerves. They feel that thing in their stomach. They feel the blood rushing to their head. They feel the clamminess, and they immediately say, oh, that means I'm nervous. What I'm telling people is, don't say that. Say you feel energy, and then reframe it into excitement. Now, I get that that's not as easy as I make it sound for a lot of people. So I have them go through what I call fear setting. And it's based off of a Tim Ferriss exercise. And we do it. It's a exercise for visualization. And essentially what you're doing is you are going to turn on a camera and record yourself. And you're going to describe the very worst thing that could possibly happen in that setting. The worst thing, like everything goes wrong, your absolute worst nightmare, and make it come to life. Then you're going to play it back and watch it. Here's what happens. One of 2 things. Either the person realizes that is absurd and it's never going to happen. So now they've put a face to their big, scary, unknown fear. And they can say, oh, the worst thing's not going to happen. That's absurd. If it is a reality, if there's some way that could happen, here's the key. Now you know how to prevent that, because now you know what it's going to take to make sure that doesn't happen. And you can prepare. So when you step on that stage, you actually succeed. So again, just by doing this visualization exercise, we've actually moved your floor a level up. So now your worst outcome is actually better than when you went in. And I saw this all the time as a trial lawyer, Eric. You would see it where people were terrified before they ever got their sentence. And as soon as they got their sentence, they didn't care, no matter how big it was. It was just the fear of the unknown that would drive them. It's the same if we think about when you go to the doctor. Before you get the prognosis, everything goes through your head of I've got this terminal disease, this terminal disease, this terminal disease. And then you go to the doctor and they're like, no, you're fine. Or even they tell you bad news, at least you know, and now you have a plan put in place to try to fix the problem. And that's really the same analogy that applies for a speaker. Identify it, don't hide from it, and then address the problem.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I really like that. Okay, so let's move on then to this idea of connecting with an audience. What are 2 or 3 strategies someone can immediately use when they're making a public speaking, when they're engaged in public speaking, to connect with an audience? Besides imagining them all naked.
I don't think I've actually ever had to do that.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That'd be way too disturbing.
I'm with you. I think the mistake a lot of people make is they create a speech and it's all about them. It's all about what I want to say, what I think needs to be said. Let's flip that. The first way to start connecting with your audience is to start thinking like them. So we ask a couple questions. What does my audience currently think? What do I want them to think at the end of my talk? And they're going to be two different places. Once we identify where they are and where I want them to go, now I can build that bridge. And my job as a speaker is essentially the Sherpa, like at Everest, to walk them across that bridge safely and say, this is really where you want to go. And I've taken you there. So the first part is we've got to start thinking about those questions and answering them. Mm-hmm. Once we do that, how do we connect with them? We start to identify what is the language that they're going to use, right? So for me, I'm a Texas boy, but I went to college in Philadelphia. My extended family's in California. I can speak Texas Southern drawl. I can use y'all all the time, but I can also go to the East Coast and not say any of that. I can speed up my pacing. I can match the way that they talk. I can go to the West Coast and do the same thing. If I'm in a CrossFit gym, I can speak that language because I'm a CrossFitter. I'm a surfer. I can speak surfer, but I can also speak lawyer in the courtroom. So what we have to identify is what's the language of our audience? How do we connect with them by speaking their language? In fact, There's a beautiful example of this when JFK was speaking in Berlin, back when the Berlin Wall was up. And that it's that Ich ein Berliner speech where he says, like, I am a Berliner, right? He's not only is he actually speaking to his audience in a way that they care about, but he literally uses their language to connect. It's a great example.
So let me just dive into that a little bit, because I immediately think it's funny you brought up JFK, because I immediately think of politicians pandering to their audiences with fake accents that are not them. So let's say I'm in front of an audience where, in terms of language, I don't. So I'm from California and I was born in England. And so if I start trying to talk with a Texas Southern drawl, I'm going to sound like a total idiot. You know what I mean? So with that kind of a disconnect, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So you want to be authentic to yourself. Like all the voices and word choice that I told you I can do, it's because those are all true to who I am. But I wouldn't go to England and try to speak with a British accent. Like that would be insane.
Right.
And so then what do? If we're in that situation and we know we're kind of a fish out of water, then we use that to our advantage. This is where we frame weaknesses into strengths. And now we add in, like, we have a fresh perspective. So they're looking for something new, and that's what we bring to them. And you haven't thought about it this way because I think differently because I'm from this place. So now instead of us being an outsider, it's, hey, this person is seeing our blind spots. Simply making those framing choices and making sure, instead of us being like, oh, I know you probably don't care to hear from me because I'm from Texas and I'm in England. That's how a lot of people would like go into it.
Right.
Instead, just be like, hey, like, I'm so excited to be here and see y'all and like have a fresh set of eyes and a new perspective on the problems you're dealing with, so that maybe you can take something away from the talk that I'm about to give you, right? Totally different frame. I'm saying the same thing 2 different ways.
Excellent. And so we have this idea of being their Sherpa, taking them from asking what do they think now and what do you want them to think. We have this idea of language, speaking their language. What's another tool that we can use to connect with our audience?
So your delivery is huge, right? Delivery tactics are really big. And this is things like taking the right pauses, slowing down, using dynamics. So there's actually a really interesting idea around speaking as creating music with your words. I call it musicality. And the way we create musicality is we create big dynamics in the way that we speak. So we're going from slow to fast, fast to slow. We're taking big pauses. Think about like your Obamas. Even if you think about we were mentioning JFK, you can listen to the rhythm that he plays with. A lot of times he pairs 2 or 3 words together, big pause, 2 or 3 words together, big pause. What happens is it sounds like music. The reason I say that's so important is when we hear music, the creative part of our brain kicks in. When the creative part of our brain kicks in, we store things deeper. There's a reason we remember song lyrics for decades. And yet we forget most of what people tell us, because most of the time they deliver it in a very monotonous way. It's not exciting. It doesn't stir the creative part of our brain. The other part, when we're really trying to connect with an audience, is storytelling. Storytelling is your absolute like gold mine of connecting with people. If we think about it, if you watch a movie or watch a TV show, you know it's fake, you know it's not real, but you will still get nervous when the hero or the main character is in danger, because storytelling actually creates dopamine and oxytocin in human beings. So it's incredible, because for a long time, they thought oxytocin was only created either with drug use or with like a bond between the mother and her child. But what they found in the late 90s was that it actually occurs when people hear a story too. So it allows you to build this empathetic relationship with your audience where they can see the world through your eyes, even if it's not your story you're sharing, just by simply sharing a story.
Very interesting. So musicality and storytelling. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Now it's very interesting as you work with executives, as you help them to get better at speaking. What do people try that doesn't work when they are doing public speaking?
Most people immediately go to books and start reading books about this stuff, which is tough because like you're reading it, and speaking is you're actually having to, use your voice, use your body language, use your gestures. Is totally different than what you read in a book. What I love to say is words on a page are in black and white. Words when spoken out loud are in color.
Right.
And it's just a different dynamic. It's 2D versus 3D. We can't really translate that. So it becomes very challenging. Now, that's not to say books are bad. I love books. I read them all the time. I'm writing one because I think they're important, but that's the first thing. The second thing is they go down these rabbit holes on YouTube, right? And they look for something and they come across one side and then they go to another side and they go to another side and they're trying to figure it out, but it doesn't really apply to them. Or that person maybe isn't the same authentic voice that they have, right? So like me and you are going to speak differently. So if you were just watching videos of me and not like actually learning the fundamental principles, it wouldn't do you a whole lot of good, because we need to understand what's that core essence. Essentially what great speaking comes down to is understanding the frameworks and the philosophy, so that then you can essentially go out there and do it in your own way. It's the whole idea of, I don't want to give you a fish. I want to teach you how to fish, because the circumstances you come into contact with on a day-to-day basis are different than the ones I come into contact with. I just understand the core principles and the essence that allows you to build on top of that. So that's really the biggest mistake. And then of course, they might start a YouTube, they might start a podcast thinking that that will get them better. It will, but the downside can be, if you're practicing bad habits, those bad habits stick, and now it's very difficult to remove them. So those are some of the common kind of pitfalls that I see. Nothing wrong with any of those approaches. I watch YouTube videos, I practice, I read books. It's just a matter of how can you actually implement that, especially for executives and leaders, when like their words carry so much weight and they've got to get it right.
Talk about that for a moment. Do you think executives really appreciate the impact they have on those that they lead?
The best ones, 100%. Most, probably not. And I'll give you an example. So when I was working as a prosecutor, prosecution offices are political offices, right? So like the elected DA is either Republican or Democrat.
Right.
And I remember the one DA I had was like, I didn't really agree with her politics, but herself and her first assistant were incredible leaders. They checked on their team all the time. They were using the right language. It was all about us, and we're in this together. And how can I help you? And where do you need to go? What do you need in order to be successful? And I remember I would have run through a wall for anything that they asked me to do. And then we had another one come in afterwards, and I actually liked his policies a lot more. I agreed with the ideas that he had, but when he was like talking to us, he was talking at us, not talking with us. He wasn't inspiring leadership. It was do it my way because I'm saying this is the right thing. That does not get buy-in to the same level. Whereas like, and I actually got better. Like I got more promotions in that office. Things were going better for me, but I still did not have that tie to that leadership, because there wasn't that language that people were really nailing in order to make sure that we would run through a wall for them, right? So I think executives and leaders need to understand how powerful the words are. I mean, think about a Steve Jobs, think about great leaders, think about how Nike is able to lead with their ads and storytelling. So I think more people need to be aware of how much impact they can have.
Okay. So you've talked, you mentioned a little earlier, this idea of frameworks and philosophy. What are some frameworks for preparing a speech that you have found to be most useful? Something that an executive can quickly lay hold of?
Sure. So the first framework that I have anybody use, this is like my main framework that encompasses everything, because I think it is the key. It's 5 parts. It's what is your goal in the talk? What is the emotion you want to create in that talk? What is the hook of your talk? What is the theme of your talk? And last, what is the dismount? Now, I'll break those down quickly because I'll make more sense.
Yeah.
Too many speakers focus on the outcome. I want somebody to buy my thing. I want them to become a customer. But we can't actually reverse engineer from there, because we don't know where that person's mind is that day. Maybe a loved one just got diagnosed with COVID. So like they're not going to buy. They're not going to become our customer that day.
Right.
If we try to reverse engineer from an outcome, like we're not going to do it. So if I'm trying to make a sale, my goal is actually the step right before the outcome, the thing that I want to put in their head to make them feel like, hey, that thing Robbie was talking about was really interesting, and I think it might be a good fit for what I do.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that? The goal. Give me an example of a goal.
So let's say, for instance, I wanted you to sign up to be a client with me for performance speaking, right? Let's just use that as an example. It's easy.
Sure.
My goal would be to show you that if you work with me at the end of 3 months, you're going to be a more confident, polished, and professional speaker.
Right.
That's the goal. The outcome would be, I want you to sign up and work with me. Right. But like you see, I'm not working to the outcome, because that's not something I can reverse engineer from. I can reverse engineer from, I want you to be more confident, polished, professional speaker.
Okay.
So what emotion do I want them to feel in that talk as well? The emotion for me might be this aha moment of speaking could really change my life.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily like a happy or joyful. It can be like a sentence or an idea can be your emotion. And in this case, that's my emotion. Like that speaking well could really change my life and open new opportunities. Like I can feel that inside of me, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that would be an example there. And then a hook would be something like, why does Warren Buffett say like the Dale Carnegie course was the most important thing for his career?
Right.
That would be a hook, right? Like everyone knows Warren Buffett. Everybody knows Dale Carnegie's speaking thing. Easy hook. And this is just like coming off the fly, right? Theme could be, if you're confidence equals competent and leaders need to always be competent.
Okay.
Could be a theme
that would go throughout the speech. Okay.
So the way that I think about it is your theme is your North Star for your talk. It's essentially the thing that all of your content points back towards, that you are saying, this is my thing. The reason why is if we think about it, those first two pieces, the goal and the emotion, those are really strategy. The next three, hook, theme, and dismount, are really tactics. Your hook is to capture that attention because people make a decision. Are they going to listen to us within 15 seconds?
Yeah.
So we've got to get it. The theme is a North Star, and your dismount is the way you finish that journey. It's your ending point that you want to get to. Right. The reason this framework works so well to prepare a speech is if you know your beginning and you know your end, and we know our North Star, we're essentially using that North Star to guide us home.
Right.
So we don't ramble. So we don't kind of just run out of steam at the end and do one of these where we just end with, and so, because it's how so many people end their speeches, right? And so, and it just kind of ends and they run out, they trail off. And so that's why the dismount is so important as well, where you would really want to stick the landing. And it could be something along the lines of, who wouldn't want to be a leader like Warren Buffett and see the success that he's seen over his career? And it all came from one course.
Right. Okay. I get that. That's really great. What is your thinking? Some people they really like to script something out, practice it again and again and again before they're comfortable. Other people, they do an outline and they just go with it. What's your opinion of what someone should do as they're preparing for a speech, perhaps in an executive environment, to their company or to a group of fellow industry professionals?
Yep. So if you're giving like a real prepared speech in front of a large group, I think it makes sense to write it out, at least to get the ideas out there.
Okay.
Now, maybe that's not going to be the thing you actually talk. So I would probably propose that you write it out a second time. So edit it down, write it out a second time. And then once you've done that, read through it a couple times, kind of let it sit in your head, and then just be able to get up and deliver. And so this is actually what I would call an extemporaneous speaking opportunity. Extemporaneous because it's prepared, but without notes. And so I think that becomes more organic and more authentic in the way you deliver it. There are some speeches, though, that need to be memorized word for word. Like you have a very specific purpose behind it. Think, again, politician would be a great example. They have messaging they want. They have talking points they want to hit. And so they've got to make sure they do it just right. That you would memorize and you would deliver in such a way that makes it sticky and makes it really stand out. But for the most part, I think most people benefit from being a little bit more kind of off the cuff, a little bit more unprepared, a little bit more extemporaneous. So they essentially are creating this outline, this idea in their head of like, here's the things I want to hit. But again, this is where we go back to that framework. If we know our hook, we know our dismount, we know our North Star, then we're just reading the audience a bunch. We're actually going through and making sure that our audience understands where we're trying to go with things. And we get to the point at the end of the day where it's a strong finish because we paid attention to them. We're getting these signs, right? Let's say your audience leans in. Let's say they go from, arms crossed, sitting back and like open up, lean in, or you see the smile, or you see the little nod, you see their eyes light up a little bit, to go in a little bit more on that. So you might change your speech just a little bit because you're like, I've got something here. They're liking it. And so you dig in, you dig in, you dig in. And now you know that you've also paid attention and built that connection to your audience.
That is an important point there, I think, because sometimes we run right by a particular opportunity because we're so anxious just to get the thing over with.
It's so true. I think so many times we just try to get, like, most speakers are like, I just want to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And the truth is you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable and embracing it. It's actually one of the big things too. Silence and pauses, most speakers don't use well because they get so uncomfortable in those moments. They can't sit there and just like absorb it.
Right.
You have to. If you want your big moments to land, you should have a couple pauses that are 3 to 5 seconds long in those. And it's interesting because speakers, we generally give ourselves about 30% of the time that the audience would give us in a silence, in a pause.
Yeah.
And so we rush it. when we need to just let it stick there and land, because it serves a number of purposes. Not only does it make those words weightier, but it also gives the audience time to really think through it themselves. And if we want our message to land, we want them to take it in and have time to think through it so it can really kind of be absorbed and take hold.
How many, so it's interesting because you use that idea of the hook with the Warren Buffett story. How many examples or stories should I be using in a speech? Should I use one story for every point I want to make? What's your thought on that? Do you have any advice?
There's no one way. I will tell you, it depends on the speech. It depends on the purpose. It depends on the timeline. You could use one story to highlight everything. You could use a bunch of little stories. You could use 3 stories. Like, there is no right answer. And I think this is one of the challenges in my opinion, it's a challenge and also the beauty of speaking. There is no right answer, but there is no right answer. And so sometimes we just kind of have to figure it out, which can be both scary and exciting.
Okay. So how do I avoid then, and you may have already talked to this quite well, but how do I avoid boring people when I'm speaking?
So again, when we think about speaking to people, if we're using these delivery tactics and techniques to create this musicality, that helps.
Yes.
So using dynamics, using pauses, using references that they're going to make, right? Speak their language. Like, I love using pop culture. I love using movies and television references. I love quotes. I love things that people know, because you'll see them kind of light up.
Yeah.
And it's really fun when you hit one and they're like, oh, and you can do ones that are like really well known, or you can do like super niche ones. If it makes you kind of special, right? Like the other day I was giving a talk and I talked about the show Battlestar Galactica. I threw a line in there from that show, super nerdy. Right. And most people had no idea, but it hit home with a couple people who afterwards were like, I love that line. Like, I love that you're into Battlestar. Like, let's talk about that. Yeah. So you can do little things like that. The other piece, again, is storytelling is a huge aspect of connecting and making it interesting to your audience. And again, we just want to make sure we're paying attention as well. So like, you will know if someone's bored,
right?
If they're bored, don't keep doing the same thing. Change it up. Like, do something. I don't know, like get animated, use a bunch of body language and facial expressions and hands, or get louder and make sure they're awake, or slow down and go really soft and slow. Because what will happen is somebody will pick up on, oh, something changed. Why did something change? And so you just got to pick up those cues and make sure you're waking people up if the time comes.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, Robbie, let's say I'm a miserable failure at public speaking. I've tried it before. I still have to do it because it's part of my job. I just hate doing it. What's the first thing I should fix first? What should I focus on first?
The first thing you need to fix is sounding like a great speaker. And that means if you really struggle with things, simple things, like a lot of the filler words or rambling or speaking too quickly, those are the first pieces that we've got to fix. The reason being is, as a leader, as an executive, if you don't sound like you know what you're talking about, people are going to judge you. So even if you have a great message, they're not going to get past that. Now, that's a pretty easy fix. Like, that thing doesn't take a ton of time to fix. Then we move into like, how can we actually help you become a great speaker? And this is where we get into mindsets and strategies and thinking about our audience and reverse engineering emotion and doing these sort of things. Then once we complete that piece, then we move into the third piece. And the third piece is actually blending both those two together. And now we're elevating, instead of just sounding like a good speaker, now we're taking that person and really playing around with these delivery dynamics and building them out so that they're much more musical, much more in control, intentional with their choices. And so you basically start with the easy stuff, you move to the middle stuff, and you finally get to the big stuff at the end that takes a lot more time. So I would say that first bit will take you 80% of the way there. That next part will take you to 90. The last bit takes you 90 to 100.
So then let me ask you that then. What do I do to get rid of my filler words besides editing furiously after I've shot a video or something like that?
So there's nothing wrong with some filler words.
Okay.
I think we have this idea that we have to be perfect and polished. And the fact is, honestly, you don't want to be, because people don't like hearing something that's perfect.
Yes.
So we want some of that in, that's perfectly fine. But how do we actually kind of think through that? We don't want it to be at the point where it becomes noticeable, and that's what somebody's picking up on.
Right.
So if that's the case, if you are saying too many of them where that's the only thing that's sticking out and it's making you sound unprofessional, unpolished, then we need to start working on getting some help, somebody who can basically kind of call you out every time you do it. Like one way is to get like a clicker or a noise device that hits on you. You can also just listen to yourself. And once you start becoming aware, then I will tell you, slow down. The biggest reason filler words exist is because you're speaking too quickly and you're uncomfortable in silence. Most people put a filler word in when their brain can't keep up with what they're going to say next, and they hate the silence. And instead of being in silence, they fill it with or like or so, because that is easier for them to deal with internally, even though it hurts them externally. So some of it is just getting comfortable, but some of it is also that idea of kind of calling it out.
I really like that. Speaking too quickly or uncomfortable with silence. So if I can think about that, then that can help me directly with those filler words, reducing them. That's excellent. I really appreciate that. Robbie, this has been a very, very interesting conversation. Again, nobody here is looking to get, stand on a stage, at least my audience. Nobody wants to stand on a stage and get paid, 50 grand for a speech, but they do want to get more effective in their communication. So you've been super helpful with that. If they wanted to get in touch with you and learn just a little bit more about what you do and how you help executives, how can they do that?
There's a number of ways. You can reach out to me via email. It's robbie@robbiecrab.com. Mm-hmm. You can also find me on Twitter, which is @RobbieCrab. You can also find me on Instagram, which is @TheRobbieCrab. I have a website. It's robbiecrabtree.com. And I also provided you, Eric, I have a 1-page Notion document that lays out kind of the services the people I work with, what I help with, and then also has a list of all of the writings that I've done that are on point for those groups. So storytelling and speaking, sales, and I also deal with creators. So I have creator economy talks as well on there. So that's a place that they can as well. I can certainly make sure that link is provided to you. But any of those places, anybody can reach out to me at any time, and I'll answer a DM in any of those social media platforms. Also on LinkedIn @TheRobbieCrab, is
Excellent.
my LinkedIn. And I'm always available.
Beautiful. I'll make sure all of those are in the show notes. Last question. You said you're in Texas. Where in Texas?
So I'm currently in Austin. I'm actually at a thing called Creator Cabins, which is a friend basically built these cabins for creators to come and work together and take their relationships from the online world into the real world. And I'm actually beta testing it right now. I live in Houston though, but I came here to help beta test a friend here at Creator Cabins.
Cool. Okay. So we're in Houston. Let's say we're visiting Houston. What is the one restaurant I've got to hit in Houston?
Depends what you like, but I would say the original Ninfa's is a classic for Tex-Mex. And then my personal favorite is a Oaxacan restaurant. There's actually 2 of them, Hugo's or Sochi.
Hugo's or Sochi. And then
Sochi
what's
is XXOCHI.
All right. And then the original what?
Ninfa's, NINFA''S.
FA''S. Okay, cool. We will put links in the show notes to those restaurants, just in case you're in Houston. Robbie, you've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thanks so much, Eric. I've had a blast. Thank you. Look forward to talking to you more soon.
Right on. Thank you. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.